Hi, I'm Isola. I used to think staying quiet kept the peace in my family, until silence made me disposable. Clean this up, my sister barked across the office like I was the cleaning staff. She called me workplace trash, and everyone laughed. But the stain on the floor wasn't the problem. It was the years of being erased, inch by inch. They took my name off reports, cut me out of family photos, redirected my father's will, all while telling me I was the strong one. So I stayed. I waited. I gathered every receipt. And when I fired the whole executive board, including her, she dropped to her knees and whispered, "Please, don't shut me out forever." Why would a sister do that? And why did everyone let her? I got to the office early that Monday morning, like I always did. The hallway lights were still dim, the kind of hush that clings to an empty building before everyone else arrives. I liked it that way. I liked the quiet. You could think when no one was around to talk over you. I placed my purse under my desk and took a slow breath. I'd reviewed the quarterly expense summary twice over the weekend and stayed up late Sunday night rechecking cross-department discrepancies. I didn't mind the work. I was good at it. And in truth, it was the one place where no one could argue with the numbers. Facts don't play favorites. People do. At 8:13 a.m., I walked past the glass break room and saw the usual suspects gathered. Valora's inner circle. Expensive coffee cups in hand, sharp heels, and sharper tongues. No one turned when I passed. I'd stopped expecting them to. I wasn't part of the branding team or the glamorous client-facing crowd. I worked in finance, the back end, the invisible wheel that kept the train from derailing. By the time I sat down and opened my laptop, I could already hear her voice, Valora, cutting through the hallway like it paid rent. I didn't look up, just kept typing, eyes on the spreadsheet. But I heard her enter the break room, high heels stabbing the floor like punctuation marks. Then came the words, "Who the hell spilled coffee? This is disgusting." She paused. "You, Isola! Clean this up. You're closer to the floor anyway." Everything stopped. The air got tight. I didn't move. The room full of coworkers, interns, associates, they all went dead silent. Then, as if on cue, a few chuckles. Someone laughed too loud, too fast. Another mumbled, "Oof," like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to join in or not. I stood there, holding a manila folder, watching Valora stare at me like I was the janitor she was fed up with. "You heard me, right?" she said louder, turning her body so the others could see her take control. "Or are you busy doing math stuff?" I wanted to say something, anything, but all I did was turn on my heel and walk away. As I passed the intern desk, I heard one of them mutter under her breath to the guy next to her, "She's used to it. Finance rats don't matter." It wasn't just the words, it was the way they said them, casual, like it was a joke they'd told before, like it had already been said in chats and threads I wasn't invited to. Back at my desk, I didn't cry. I didn't slam anything. I just sat down, reopened my spreadsheet, and resumed work like it was just another Monday. 2 hours later, I overheard a pair of managers by the printer. One of them chuckled and said, "Did you see the new meme? Trash tracker, now with expense fraud sensors." I knew immediately. I turned my screen slightly, opened the internal chat portal, and clicked a tab one of them had left open during a shared screen session last week. There it was. My initials photoshopped onto a cartoon raccoon digging through a dumpster labeled "Company Budgets." Caption, "Workplace trash. Hundreds of laugh reacts." A GIF response of a trash compactor. A string of hashtags. "Office rats." "Clean it up." Should have gone back to accounting. I didn't feel humiliated anymore. I felt something else. Like I was floating outside myself, watching the way people strip someone down, piece by piece, while smiling. No one apologized. No one asked if I was okay. In the same hour, someone even sent a meeting invite with me, listed as support role. Support. I minimized the browser, pressed save on my spreadsheet again, out of habit, and stood up. I walked to the restroom, shut the door, and looked at myself in the mirror. Same navy blouse, same practical bun, same woman who built the budget process that kept this company from going under 2 fiscal years ago. And now? A joke in a group chat, a meme to laugh at during lunch breaks. I stared at my own reflection and whispered, I built this floor. I paid for this office, before she ever learned to manage a calendar. The lights flickered overhead. I didn't flinch. You want me to clean up? I murmured, looking straight into my own eyes. Fine. Let's start with this entire company. I didn't say anything else to my reflection. I just rinsed my hands, straightened the collar of my blouse, and walked out of that restroom like the walls hadn't just heard me make a promise I couldn't take back. The rest of the day passed in a quiet blur. Paperwork, polite nods, hollow smiles. No one brought up what happened in the break room that morning. Of course they didn't. It was easier to pretend nothing happened when you weren't the one being humiliated. By the time I left the office, the sun had already ducked behind the hills. Downtown Seattle had that washed-out amber glow the city wore just before night took over. I didn't take the freeway home. I took the long route down Elliott Avenue, windows down, letting the cool air slap against my skin. I didn't feel like going straight home, but I also didn't feel like being anywhere else. My apartment sat on the edge of Queen Anne. Quiet, top floor, no shared walls, no photos on the walls, no family portraits, just beige, white, and steel. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the kettle. The silence inside matched the one I'd kept inside myself all day. I didn't cry. I haven't in years. Instead, I sat on the couch with my laptop balanced on my knees, scrolling through expense reports, trying to convince myself I still cared. That's when my phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at the notification without opening it for a moment. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I tapped. Don't escalate this. Your sister's reputation matters to the family. That was it. No greeting. No, how are you? No, what happened? Just an instruction. A warning wrapped in fake concern. I reread it, blinking slowly. My mother didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask if it was true. She didn't even pretend to check on me. The only thing she cared about was Valora's image. And that wasn't new. I set the phone down on the coffee table, next to a half-finished cup of tea that had gone cold. My fingers clenched around the edge of the cushion beside me. You always take her side, I whispered into the empty room. My voice sounded foreign. I leaned back and let the silence wrap around me. Then, as if someone had hit play on a film reel I couldn't stop, the memories came back. Sunday dinners when we were kids. Valora got the big plate, the seat next to Dad, the first slice of cake. I got the dishes, the scraped leftovers, the smile that meant, you're a good girl for understanding. She's older, you're the patient one. You're the smart one, she's the face. You'll get your time. My time never came. I was 12 when Valora crashed her car into a neighbor's mailbox and blamed me for distracting her. She didn't even blink when she said it. I got grounded for a month. I was 15 when she accidentally copied my essay and got an award for it. Mom told me to be proud for both of us. I was 17 when I got into a state university on my own, and Valora got a private college acceptance after Dad pulled some strings. Guess who they threw the party for? Everything about my life had been a hand-me-down, even my dignity. My phone lit up again. Same message, still no follow-up. I opened the messaging app and typed, "Understood," but I didn't hit send. Instead, I opened the Notes app. I stared at the blinking cursor, then began typing slowly, deliberately. I will never again be the daughter who takes the fall so someone else can shine. I read it 3 times. Then I added a second line. Let them pick sides. I'm done begging to be seen. I saved it, closed the app. Then I picked up the phone, stared at Mom's message one last time, and deleted it without responding. I placed the phone face down. I could hear the city traffic outside, the occasional bark of a dog, the hum of someone's television 2 floors down. But inside my apartment, it was still. I exhaled through my nose, leaned forward, and whispered to myself, let's see how much of her reputation she can keep when the truth starts bleeding. The drizzle hadn't stopped since sundown. It beat gently against the living room window, tapping a rhythm that filled the silence my mother had left hanging. I hadn't turned on any lights, just let the laptop screen be the only source of glow in the room. The tea had gone cold, and I didn't bother reheating it. Some things aren't worth salvaging once they've sat too long. I clicked into an old folder I hadn't opened in years, one I'd created after Dad died. Estate documents. It wasn't a place I went to often, mostly because it reminded me of how little he left behind for me, and how much had somehow ended up in Valora's hands. Scrolling down, I saw subfolders: tax returns, property titles, photos, scans. I clicked on the last one. The screen flickered for a moment before displaying a grid of faded JPEGs and PDFs. School certificates, birthday cards, scanned handwritten notes. But one image caught my attention. It was labeled Senior Year, Acceptance Letter.pdf. I opened it. There it was, the letter I'd tried so hard to forget. I'd been 17. Quiet, awkward, but finally, recognized for something I had created with my own hands. A full-ride scholarship to an art institute in Portland, a place I had dreamed of since I was 13. They'd picked me for my portfolio, not my grades, not my face, just what I'd made. I remember the night I brought the letter to dinner. I was beaming, I'll admit that. Even Dad smiled. But then Mom said it. The words that undid the moment like pulling a single thread in a sweater. It's better if Valora takes it. She's got the grades, the discipline, and, let's be honest, she photographs better. They'll be glad to have her. You'll find something else. Maybe accounting. You're good with numbers. No one looked at me after that, like the decision had been made and I just needed to accept it. That night, I tore the letter in half and flushed it down the toilet. No one ever asked why I stopped drawing. I closed the file, my chest tight, then clicked on the next image, one labeled Company Launch, PR Event. The photo loaded slowly. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It was the launch party for Valora Group 6 years ago. I remembered that night vividly. I'd stood right beside Valora on stage, holding the champagne glass she'd refused to carry because she didn't want fingerprints in photos. I'd introduced her to our first major client. I'd even drafted the original financial model. But in this photo, I was gone. Cropped. Neatly. Precisely. Gone. Only Valora remained in the frame, smiling, standing alone as if she'd built the company from the ground up by herself. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I zoomed in, just to be sure. The angle of the champagne glass confirmed it. It had been passed to her just after the speech. That moment used to have both of us in it. Now it was just her, sparkling under warm lights, smiling for cameras. I sat there for a while, not moving, not thinking, because this wasn't an accident. It wasn't the first time, and it sure as hell wouldn't be the last if I kept pretending it didn't matter. They didn't erase me with rage or cruelty. They erased me with silence, with editing, with a mission, 1 inch at a time. She's the face. You're the structure. She's the one we can show. You're the one who supports. You're good at disappearing. That's a strength. I whispered to myself, they never erased me by force. They did it by design. I moved the photo file into a new folder and renamed it. Recovery begins here. Then, without hesitation, I opened a new spreadsheet and titled it Ownership Timeline. This time, I would write the story in a language they couldn't crop out. 2 days passed. I didn't rush anything. I came in exactly on time, not a minute early like I used to. No coffee in hand, no smile for the receptionist. I moved through the building like someone who'd lived through a fire and now knew exactly which beams were hollow. The conference prep room was already half full. I stepped in quietly and took a seat at the far end of the table. My revised forecast report sat neatly in my bag. Not a soul acknowledged me as I sat down. No glance, no nod, no mention of what had happened in that break room earlier in the week. It was as if none of it had occurred. The laughter, the stain, the command to clean it up like I was part of the janitorial staff. Forgotten. Valora wasn't there yet. But the team buzzed around like bees waiting on their queen. Junior managers leafed through folders, straightening their backs whenever someone from senior leadership passed by. A manila packet was slid across the table toward me. "Printouts?" a younger manager muttered, not looking up. I opened the folder and turned to the title page of the presentation deck. And there it was. Again. My name, misspelled. Again. I didn't blink, didn't sigh. I simply checked the footer to see who had compiled the final deck. Edited, Valora.d, of course. I opened my email to trace the thread. Just as I suspected, Valora had submitted the final version to design. I had sent my reviewed and formatted file a day prior. Corrected, aligned, clean. And now I was Isloa Deland, like a typo on a throwaway receipt. I raised my hand slightly, not high, not enough to make a scene. "Excuse me," I said, eyes trained on the man who had slid the folder my way. "There's a spelling error in the deck, my name." He shrugged. "It's probably just an oversight." Valora walked in just then, voice bright, perfume sharper than necessary. "Oh, that?" she said, glancing over. "Don't be so sensitive, Isola. It's a name, not a trademark." A few chuckles followed. Light, harmless, just enough to sting. I didn't answer. I closed the folder and adjusted my seat. She stood at the front now, poised, pointing toward the screen. "Let's walk through the client-facing strategy for Q3. I'll explain what I developed for risk allocation and cost containment." Risk allocation, cost containment, the slide deck she was referring to? Mine. The one I'd spent 3 months building, hours of analysis, projections, simulations. And now, it had her name at the bottom of every slide. She hadn't even changed the formatting, my structure, my graphs, my embedded footnotes, still there. She'd just slapped her initials over it like a stamp of ownership. No one questioned it. Of course they didn't. They saw her as the face. I was just the woman who sent the budget drafts at 10 p.m. While she presented my data like it was hers, I stayed silent. Not frozen, just watching. I clicked open my own laptop. The folder sat there, waiting. Truth Protocol. Inside it, time-stamped emails, original documents, changelogs. I opened a blank note and typed slowly. "Let them talk. I'll speak once. That'll be enough." The room applauded her last slide. Her voice rang out, confident and polished. I clicked open my email, addressed a message to myself, attached the original version of the forecast deck, and typed in the subject line. RE, ownership of all work presented today. I hit send. And I smiled. Just a little. The email sat in my inbox for exactly 4 minutes before I opened it. I'd just returned from the conference room, my palms still warm from the subtle applause Valora stole off my back. I had set my laptop down on the small desk in one of the side offices, quiet, rarely used, and was preparing to return to a normal afternoon of ledger reviews and upcoming Q4 projections. But there it was. From Thorn Kazan subject. "You deserve to see this." I hadn't seen Thorn's name in months, maybe longer. He was the former IT manager, the one who vanished from the main office after what HR called departmental restructuring. We all knew better. I clicked the attachment. It was a PDF export, Slack transcripts. The file name read, exec, channel, export, private, Slack data. PDF I didn't have to scroll far. Why is she still here? Thought we'd made it clear. Finance rats are hard to kill, always sneaking under the radar. If she steps out of line again, we make her redundant, period. And then a meme. The same one from the hallway printer weeks ago, my initials pasted over a trash can. My thumb hovered over the trackpad. I kept reading. The conversation continued with casual cruelty, as if I were an object they forgot could feel. I closed the laptop, then reopened it. I replied to Thorne's email. "You gave me more than evidence. You gave me the right to be angry. Thank you." It wasn't poetry, but it was honest. A few minutes passed. I heard faint laughter down the hall, Valora's voice rising like it always did when she knew someone was listening. I stood, printed the file, and slid the pages into a plain gray folder. No labels, no dramatics. Later that afternoon, I waited until the floor cleared out. I passed by the glass corridor that led to the HR director's office, Ms. Ramirez. She was finishing up a call when I knocked once and stepped in without waiting. She looked up, surprised, but didn't speak. I placed the folder on her desk and met her eyes. She reached for it slowly, opening the flap just enough to glimpse the printout inside. Her expression didn't change. She closed the folder and slid it into the drawer beside her keyboard. "That's a serious allegation," she said quietly. "It's not an allegation if it's printed," I replied. She didn't nod, didn't frown, just tapped her fingernail against the drawer. "We'll see where this goes." I turned and left. No fanfare, no fireworks, just one more card placed on the table. By the time the sun dipped low enough to blur itself against the office glass, I was waiting for the elevator. The floor was quiet now, the energy shifting like something had exhaled after holding its breath too long. The doors opened, and there she was, Valora, alone. She stepped inside without looking at me, stood near the buttons like she owned the entire shaft. I entered without a word. The doors closed behind us. The silence was almost intimate. We passed floor after floor, and she still didn't acknowledge me. That was her power move. Pretend I didn't exist until it became inconvenient to keep pretending. But this time, I didn't stay quiet. I turned my head toward her. "You know what's funny?" She looked over, blinking like someone caught off guard for the first time in years. "I used to think your silence meant strength," I said. "Now I know it's just fear wearing heels." She opened her mouth, closed it, smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You don't have to play this game, Isola," she said softly. "It won't end the way you think." I leaned closer, just enough. "Do it again," I said, voice steady, "and the next person you'll answer to won't be me." The doors opened. She stepped out without a word. I stayed, let the doors close again. Back in the side office, I powered up my laptop, created a new folder on my desktop, and titled it, Timeline of Executive Abuse and Asset Manipulation. Then, I opened a blank document. At the top, I wrote, "This ends on my terms." I closed the document and leaned back, letting the cursor blink on that single sentence like a metronome. "This ends on my terms." It wasn't a declaration. It was a quiet vow. No courtroom speech, no corporate tantrum, just a record. A line in a timeline they'd never thought I'd build. By Sunday night, I had gone through every folder I could access remotely. My eyes were dry from screen glare, but my gut was more awake than ever. So when Monday came, I was the first one in the building. The halls were dim, the carpet still vacuum-striped from weekend cleaning. I bypassed my desk and walked straight to the lower-level records room. It was rarely used anymore. Everything had gone digital. But I remembered what we kept there in those early days. Original binders, hard copy contracts, scanned wire confirmations, and a few old bank ledgers we never bothered to destroy. I found what I was looking for on the fourth shelf, bottom row. A navy blue binder with a cracked spine and a silver label that read, Founding Capital. It was heavier than I remembered. I brought it to the small table and flipped through page after page until I found the wire receipt. $212,000. Transferred from a trust account. My name. My signature. Dated 3 months before Valora Group Communications even existed legally. It hadn't come from Valora. It wasn't mentioned in the press kits or the launch interviews. The official narrative had always been the same. built from the ground up by one woman's vision. Funny, that woman had never opened her own trust account. I traced the ridged emboss of the receipt header with my fingertip and whispered, "This company was built with my future, and they wrote me out of its history." As I packed up the binder and walked out, the early birds had started to arrive. A few nodded in passing, most didn't, but something in the way they glanced over their shoulders told me they'd started to notice the shift. Back at my desk, I locked the binder in my bottom drawer and opened my inbox. 3 unread messages. One stood out. From jordan.ellisofvaloragroup.com. Subject: Hey, can I share something? Jordan Ellis, junior accountant, barely out of grad school. I clicked it open. Hi, Isola, I just wanted to say, I saw how Valora talked to you last week. I didn't say anything. I should have. 3 years ago, I filed an HR report against someone on her team. It wasn't just me. Others had concerns too. Valora pulled me into her office and told me, "This isn't the hill you want to die on." The complaint was never submitted. HR said there was no follow-up. I still have the original draft if you want it. Just thought you should know you're not alone. I stared at the screen, then typed, "Forward it." 30 minutes later, I had the redacted complaint in my hand. Same tone, same dismissiveness, same pattern. And now, the second witness. At noon, I walked into the finance department's weekly update. Small room, 10 chairs, everyone chatting over lukewarm coffee. I took my usual seat at the corner and waited for the small talk to fade. I began to speak. Numbers, projections, cash flow stress points. Halfway through, Valora entered. She didn't knock. She didn't sit. She just cut in. "I'd like to add something to that. Isola and I have reviewed the figures, and—" I didn't let her finish. "No," I said, looking straight at her. "You will wait, and you will listen." The room went still. No one moved. No one sipped their coffee. Even the air felt like it stopped circulating. Valora blinked once, lips parting slightly. But I didn't let her speak again. I turned back to the team and continued. Slide by slide, word by word. By the end, my voice didn't shake, not once. That night, back at my apartment, I opened the folder that had slowly grown over the past week and renamed it Case File: Misappropriation, Abuse, and Concealed Funding Sources. I slipped a yellow sticky note on the front. It said one thing: Board ready. Wednesday came without warning. The clouds hadn't broken since Monday, and Seattle wore that gray sweater it clung to half the year. Damp, hushed, familiar. I arrived at the office an hour earlier than the rest. I wasn't there to beat traffic or to look dedicated. I was there to take a seat they'd spent years making sure I'd never touch. By 9, the top-floor conference room was lit like a surgical theater. Chrome table, white LED panels overhead, and a panoramic view of Elliott Bay that executives loved pointing to during investor calls. I'd never sat in that room before. Not really. Not with a seat and a nameplate and a packet of documents with my initials. This time, my name wasn't misspelled. The CFO, a man named Pritchard, who once told me in a hallway that I had a real talent for staying invisible, cleared his throat. "We've had a shift in voting shares this week," he announced to the room. The boardroom quieted. Valora raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She was seated at the head, as usual, hands folded like a sermon was about to start. I stood, walked to the front of the room, and placed a folder on the table. I opened it slowly and laid out the proxy documentation for each holding company and individual investor I had acquired, accumulated, or quietly negotiated with over the last 18 months. Effective this morning, I said, I represent 53.4% of total shareholder voting power. I didn't smile, but I did watch Valora's lips tighten. Pritchard blinked, nodded once, and turned to the board. No one spoke. No one looked at Valora. Not yet. From my laptop, I projected a screen onto the board's monitor. A single PDF titled Capital Rescue, Q2 Internal Use Only. It took a second to load. "This wire," I said, pointing to the highlighted line, is the transfer that saved this company during last quarter's liquidity panic. Someone at the end of the table asked, "That was from the investor in Dubai, wasn't it?" I looked at him directly. "That investor," I said, "was me." A few heads turned. One of the women from legal looked at Valora, then back at me. I continued, calm but unwavering. "It came from my private trust, established by my father, the same trust that funded the company's original launch." I let the silence settle into the corners of the room. Valora finally laughed. Not loudly, just enough to force the air to shift. "So this is what you've been doing," she said, "buying up favors and secrets. Isola, come on. Are you really going to play this game?" I turned to her, unblinking. "You taught me the rules," I said. "I'm just finally playing." She stood slowly, the legs of her chair scraping the tile. "I don't think you understand what you're trying to burn down." "No," I said. "I think I finally understand exactly what you built." A murmur rippled across the board. No one moved to stop her. No one defended her. I sat down and pulled out the red folder I'd been carrying for a week. On the cover, irregularities in executive conduct and allocation practices. I passed it to Pritchard. Then one to legal, one to HR. Inside, receipts, messages, emails, internal transfers, rewritten documents. 2 complaints that never made it past HR's firewall. No raised voice, no finger pointed, just documentation. By the time I stood to leave, no one was talking. Some avoided my eyes. Others followed me with something that looked a lot like respect. As I reached the door, I heard someone say, barely above a whisper, "We've been working for the wrong Delane all this time." I didn't stop walking. But for the first time in years, I let myself smile. And I didn't hide it. 2 days after that meeting, I walked into the same building where I once got ordered to clean up a spilled coffee, like I was the janitor. This time, my name was on the agenda. The lobby smelled like fresh polish and tension. I could feel it in the way the receptionist smiled too quickly, in how the board members huddled near the elevators didn't make eye contact. The annual shareholders meeting was about to begin, and they all knew this one would be different. I stepped into the main auditorium at Valora Group HQ. It was the same space where we used to host holiday luncheons and new client showcases. The same room where, once, a junior manager shared a joke about office trash during a team-building game and everyone laughed. Today, no one laughed. I wore a simple charcoal gray suit, no earrings, hair pulled back, no smile. The chair of the board welcomed everyone with the usual polished optimism. "We're proud to report another profitable year," he said, "thanks to the leadership of our executive team." I waited, patiently. When the floor opened for shareholder comments, I raised my hand. People turned, a few startled. I stood. "I invoke my right as majority shareholder," I said, "to present a grievance to the board." You could have heard a pin drop. Valora, seated near the front, shifted. Her lips pressed into a controlled smile, but her eyes had already started to narrow. I stepped forward and laid a red-bound file on the center table. These pages contain documented evidence of misappropriated credit, retaliatory management practices, and unethical conduct involving both personnel and financial reporting. Someone coughed. No one reached for their water. The head of HR, a woman named Karen Lopez, opened the file slowly. Her eyebrows drew together as she began scanning the table of contents. I continued. Attached are time-stamped emails, project handovers, HR complaints never filed, and documentation of employee reports redirected or erased. Valora still hadn't spoken. The legal counsel leaned forward, flipping through the report. I watched his hand stop at a specific page, and he pulled out a pen to mark it. It was only when I reached the final section that I changed my tone. "And in addition," I said, "as confirmed by the last certified addendum to the Delane Family Estate Trust," I opened a separate envelope and passed it to the chair. "My father named me, not Valora, as the intended successor to any family-held equity interest in this organization. Valora flinched. No, she said suddenly, her voice cracking. No, he never told me that. I met her eyes and didn't blink. Maybe because he knew you wouldn't listen. The boardroom filled with an eerie quiet, the kind you only hear when people are doing mental math with morality and reputation. I turned to the chair again. I motioned for an immediate vote of confidence in the executive board. Silence. Then someone cleared their throat. One by one, hands went up. Not all, but enough. Valora looked around. Her smile was gone. Her voice silent. The chair nodded. Motion passes. Executive restructuring will commence immediately. Security appeared without being called. Quiet. Professional. Valora stood but didn't move. She looked directly at me. You never wanted the spotlight, she said, her voice brittle. Why now? I walked toward the exit and said the words I'd been carrying for far too long. Because this time, I own the room they laughed in. A week passed. The rain hadn't let up once. The same light gray drizzle traced down the towering glass windows of Valora Group HQ, as if the sky itself refused to move on. The city kept its head low, the clouds hanging like grief that hadn't cleared. But inside, everything had shifted. I stepped off the elevator just before 7. Early, as always. But the difference now wasn't the hour, it was the key card in my hand. My badge didn't just let me into my office anymore. It opened every door. There was no hesitation when I walked. No looking over my shoulder. No second-guessing which way power was shifting that day. The halls were silent, except for the distant hum of the heating system and the click of my boots on the polished tile. The air still smelled faintly of wood polish, printer toner, and someone's peppermint tea. All familiar, all the same, but beneath it all, something deeper had changed. Me. I carried my coffee in the same stainless steel travel mug I'd owned for years. Scuffed, dependable, unpretentious. It had survived more boardroom battles than most people realized. And now, as I passed the glass doors to the executive lounge, it felt like a relic of everything I'd earned the hard way. Near the window, a single envelope waited on the armrest of a leather chair. Cream cardstock, hand-delivered, neatly printed. From HR, Structure Update, Subject, Acting CEO, Isola Delane. There it was. No interim title, no temporary placement, no asterisk hovering over my name like a footnote to someone else's legacy. It was official. I sat by the window and watched the city begin its slow, familiar routine. Lights flickered on in the towers across the street, each square of brightness marking someone waking up to a new morning. The break room ice machine sputtered awake somewhere on the floor below. A janitor's cart squeaked gently near the freight elevator. None of it was new, but everything about it felt different. The silence didn't feel lonely, it felt earned. I sipped my coffee and leaned back. Let it settle. The people who passed me in the hall didn't greet me like they used to. Gone were the awkward nods, the too casual, "Hey there," or the dismissive smiles. Now it was, "Good morning, Ms. Delane." "Congratulations, Ms. Delane." "Welcome back, Ms. Delane." And that name, Delane, it didn't just belong to him anymore. It had stopped being shorthand for someone else's power. Now, when they said it, they meant me. They saw me. But there was something else, too. Behind the professionalism, behind the new formality, a trace of curiosity, a flicker in their eyes like they were trying to read me, map out who I'd really been all those years, what they'd failed to notice while whispering behind closed doors or laughing at my expense. I didn't give them answers, only the work. Then she appeared. Valora. I hadn't seen her since the shareholder vote. The whispers said she'd cleaned out her office quietly that same night, slipping away without a word, without a scene. Just gone. Now she stood in the break room doorway. No suit, no jewelry. Hair undone, face bare. Not a single file in her hands. Not even a phone. She looked like a woman who had nothing left to defend. I followed her in, quietly. She turned when she heard my steps, slowly, like someone too tired to fake anything anymore. Our eyes met, and this time, hers weren't sharpened to wound. They held no defiance, no fire, just something heavier, something that looked a lot like regret. "I was afraid of you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You were always better, and I couldn't stand it." I didn't interrupt. She wasn't finished. "I needed to win something for once," she continued, "even if it wasn't mine to win." Her voice softened to almost nothing. "Please, don't shut me out forever." The words didn't crash into me. They didn't pierce. They landed gently, like dust on an old book, years too late, settling into cracks already sealed. I didn't offer comfort. That wasn't mine to give anymore. Instead, I reached into my bag and handed her a thin manila folder. Inside, her finalized severance agreement, her HR contact, and a clean ending. "This is all that's left between us," I said. She didn't take the folder right away. Her hand reached out, but not for the papers. For me. She touched my hand like it might undo something, heal something, reverse time. I let her. For 1 second. Long enough to remember the first time she took credit for something I built. The first time she smiled as I was diminished. Then I pulled away. "I don't hate you," I told her, "but I'm done bleeding to keep you whole." She nodded. Didn't argue. She turned and left with the folder held tight to her chest. Later that afternoon, I walked past the hallway where someone once left a sticky note on my desk that read "Office Trash" in bold red ink. That same corridor where people used to lower their voices when I walked by, where my ideas got repeated by louder mouths and rewarded with louder applause. A young analyst, couldn't have been older than 25, stood by the printer. He saw me. Eyes widened. He straightened like he suddenly realized who I was. "You built this, didn't you?" he asked. I stopped. Looked at him, not with pride, not with superiority, just peace. "No," I said. "I rebuilt it." Back in my office, I sat at the desk she used to claim as her throne. The room was brighter than I remembered. The windows felt wider. Maybe they'd always been that way. Maybe I just finally saw them. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out an old photograph I'd kept hidden beneath a stack of notebooks. Me and Dad, outside the first Delane storefront. The beginning. He had his arm around my shoulder, and I had a paintbrush in one hand and my ponytail slung over the other. We were both smiling like we didn't yet know how hard it would get. No cropping, no filters, no edits, just truth. I set the photo on my desk, right where it belonged. I didn't need to rewrite the story. I just needed to reclaim it. And now, I had. "Hi, I'm Odessa. My parents told me I was born to support the star." So I stood quietly while they cropped me out of family photos, sat me behind catering tables, and told everyone I'd left the military because I couldn't handle it. They called it love. But what kind of love deletes your name from a service record? What kind of family tells guests you're just admin support when you were the one leading operations no one's allowed to talk about? At my sister's promotion ceremony, they erased me again. Until her general stood up and called me by a rank they never believed I'd earned. What happens when the person you buried doesn't stay quiet? What happens when the silence salutes back? I crossed the state line just as the sky shifted into that dusty amber only North Carolina manages to perfect in late October. Fort Liberty hadn't changed much, but then again, I hadn't expected it to. Military bases rarely age. They just settle into themselves like veterans with too many medals and too few friends. As I drove past the south gate, the guards barely glanced at me. That felt right. I've always been the kind of story people choose not to know. No one was waiting for me when I pulled into the driveway. I sat in the car longer than necessary, watching the familiar front porch like it might react to my presence. It didn't. My mother hadn't responded to my last 2 texts. No surprise there either. I'd grown accustomed to silence being her preferred language. When I finally stepped out and gathered my overnight bag, the crisp air bit at my collar. The leaves scattered along the walkway, crunching under my boots. I paused on the porch, hand hovering over the doorknob. Then I pushed it open. Laughter drifted from the back of the house. Meredith was entertaining. Of course she was. The dining room lights were on, chairs pushed close around the table. No one noticed me. I passed through the living room and stopped short. The family photo above the mantel had been updated. There was Rayburn, stoic as ever. Leora, radiant in her dress blues. My younger cousin's son filled the far corner, where I remembered standing in the last version of that picture. I stared at the frame, slightly off-kilter on the nail. Then, gently, I adjusted it. Upstairs, the guest room smelled like lemon cleaner and thyme. I set my bag down, pulled out my phone, and opened the group family chat. I'd sent a simple message the week before. "Proud of you, Leora. See you soon." It was gone. My messages log confirmed it was delivered, which meant only one thing. Meredith, as group admin, had deleted it. She never did like clutter. That cut deeper than any direct insult. Words unsaid can be sharp, but words sent and erased, that's a decision. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the silence roll over me. Across the room, the closet door was ajar. I knew what waited behind it. But first, my mind wandered. Backward, as it often did. I was 10 when Rayburn first set up the training drills for us kids. My brother got to be squad leader. Leora played the field medic. I was given a clipboard and told to observe for strategy. I didn't know then that observe would be my lifelong assignment. "You've got good eyes, kiddo," my dad said once. "Not everyone gets to be the face of the mission. Some of us support the stars." He said it like it was noble, like I should be grateful. And for a while, I was. Until I realized stars burn out. And some of us never even got to glow. The guest room hadn't changed much. Same beige walls, same quilted throw folded at the foot of the bed. My suitcase sat unopened beside it. I unzipped it slowly, pulling out the ceremonial jacket I hadn't worn in over a decade. The fabric still held its shape, stiff, unyielding, a metaphor I couldn't unsee. I laid it across the bed, smoothing the edges. Then I looked at myself in the mirror, letting the years fall away. The woman staring back wasn't invisible. She wasn't a footnote. She had led men through chaos, made decisions that haunted her, held hands of soldiers who didn't make it home. "You can't hang medals on walls where you've been erased," I whispered. The door creaked, and Meredith stood in the frame, arms crossed. "You arrived," she said. "Good. Try not to wear anything bold tomorrow. It's Leora's day." I held her gaze. "I'm not here to take anything." "Good," she replied, walking off, "because it's not your moment." I waited until her footsteps faded. Then I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My fingers grazed the lapel of the jacket again. The silence in this house wasn't just emptiness. It was engineered. Some families use words to wound. Mine? We use omission. I checked the medals inside my bag. All polished. All irrelevant here. The only recognition that mattered to them was what fit in a frame, what could be posted with hashtags, what Leora could wear without my shadow touching the edge of her spotlight. I leaned back against the headboard, eyes tracing the ceiling fan's slow rotation. This wasn't grief. It was something colder, and maybe more useful. They'd written their story so long, they forgot I knew how to hold a pen, too. Later that night, I reached into my uniform bag once more. I didn't put the jacket on, not yet. I laid it out with care, pressing the sleeves flat. Then I whispered, "Maybe it's time they remembered who used to wear this. Maybe it was the lighting in the guest room that morning, or the way the air felt too still, like something was waiting to be said and wasn't." I sat at the edge of the bed, holding a photo I should have stopped looking at years ago. It was my cadet graduation day. Everyone was in dress blues. The version I kept in my drawer back home had all of us in the frame, even if I stood slightly off to the side. This one? This one was cropped, tight, clean, efficient. My shoulder was gone. Erica and our brother looked centered, proud, perfect. I looked like I had never been there at all. I traced the edge of the frame with my thumb. Whoever did the cropping had taken care not to make it obvious. But I saw it. I always saw it. And I'd learned that the most dangerous kind of rewriting wasn't done with words. It was done with scissors. I didn't put on the uniform, not yet. Instead, I changed into a neutral blouse and slacks, nothing bold, nothing worth commenting on, and drove myself to the ceremony hall. Fort Liberty hadn't changed much, but the people inside had. Or maybe just their willingness to acknowledge me had. No one greeted me when I walked in. A junior staffer looked at my ID, then frowned slightly. "You're admin support, right?" I held her gaze for just long enough to watch her flinch. Then I smiled. "Sure," I said. "Let's go with that." She led me to a row in the back, near the catering tables. It wasn't labeled, just a handful of generic chairs. No names, no affiliations, no ranking. I sat. No one turned around. It was almost impressive, the way invisibility could be choreographed. While waiting for the event to begin, I scanned the official event program. The layout was glossy, patriotic. Family highlights, photos from prior promotions, holidays, deployments. And there, right in the middle, was a photo from one of the family celebrations, one I vividly remembered attending. I remembered standing next to my father in that picture. In this version, I was gone. Again. "You had to cut me again," I whispered under my breath. "Even from this?" It didn't sting, not like it used to. It just confirmed what I already knew. They weren't erasing me out of cruelty. They were doing it for comfort. I rose to find my seat at the reception table. I'd been told the seating would be alphabetical. But when I reached the spot where my name should have been, there was a card that read Lieutenant Danvers. Not even close. I picked it up, turned it over. Nothing on the back. A senior aide wandered over, distracted. "Sorry, we had a seating mix-up," he said without looking at me. Across the room, I saw Meredith guiding Erica's media liaison toward the front row, laughing with that perfectly timed warmth she reserved for performances. That's when I realized it wasn't a mix-up. It was strategy. I returned to the back, no longer interested in pretending to belong at their table. I sat alone and listened to the click of polished shoes on marble floors, the way officers adjusted their uniforms with practiced ease. The room filled with familiar sounds, but none of them belonged to me. When Erica entered, the room stirred. Light applause, a few handshakes, flashes from someone's phone. She walked like someone who had been practicing for this moment her whole life. And maybe she had. Her uniform was perfect, her smile effortless. She glanced my way, nodded, but didn't approach. Meredith rushed forward and embraced her like a soldier returning from war. I stayed seated. Not because I wasn't capable of standing, but because I'd stood in more war zones than Erica would ever know. They just didn't have photographers. I shifted in my seat and glanced around. People had started to settle. A few whispered to each other. A few glanced in my direction and quickly looked away. I let my hands rest on my lap, breathing slowly. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to flinch. Behind me, 2 junior officers chatted in hushed tones. One of them murmured, "She looks familiar. Wasn't she in that canceled op? The Ghost Commander?" I didn't move, but my fingers curled around the edge of the seat. I didn't sleep. Not really. I laid there, watching moonlight stretch its way across the ceiling until it caught the edge of the uniform bag sitting silently at the foot of the bed. It stared at me like it had its own memory of being forgotten. Some medals aren't worn. Some uniforms don't make it out of the duffel, not because they're retired, but because pulling them out would make someone else feel less than. And in this house, that's a bigger crime than lying. At some point past midnight, I got up and opened the bag. My hands were steady as I pulled out the jacket. The fabric was stiff, pristine. Too pristine. The collar still held the crease from its original fold. The insignia shimmered faintly in the low light. It was beautiful, and it was buried for years. Not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered to the wrong person. I reached for the file tucked beside it. Old commendations, sealed evaluations, even a personal note from a now-deceased general tucked between 2 pages like an accidental bookmark. The note had just one sentence, scrawled in the corner with a pencil that had faded over time. "You'll get yours in the long game, Walsh, or you'll disappear for their comfort." And there it was. Raptor Climb. That mission should have been the moment everything shifted. We were in hostile territory, non-permissive zone, no air cover. Intel was a mess, communications worse. I took a team across the line, extracted 6 captives and 2 bodies. We lost no one else. The report I filed was detailed, clear, precise. Then it was scrubbed. They gave the public credit to Colonel Hansen, a man who hadn't even been in the region. My name? Buried under Joint Command. The version that hit the press said, "A collaborative effort by U.S. personnel." I stopped reading after that. No one in my family asked about it. No, "Are you okay?" No, "We're proud." It wasn't on TV, so in their minds, it didn't happen. Leora once said to me, back when she was still pretending to listen, "What's the point of leading if no one sees it?" I didn't answer then. But my answer came loud and clear now, as I stared at my untouched awards. To make sure someone gets home, not someone gets famous. When morning finally arrived, I was already dressed. Not in the uniform. No. That stayed folded on the bed. I just stared at it for a long moment before gently brushing off the thin layer of dust that had gathered over time. Dust from neglect, not from dirt. I placed the jacket on the chair by the window, its sleeves neatly arranged as if they held form on their own. I wasn't going to wear it. Not yet. Not for them. But I needed it out in the open. Needed to remind myself that I had worn it once, and I could again. The smell of coffee drifted up from the kitchen, familiar, bitter. I moved downstairs, footsteps quiet on wood I'd once been scolded for running across barefoot. In the dining room, Meredith was already halfway through her first cup, speaking to a neighbor. My father's voice joined hers, listing off Leora's assignments with the enthusiasm of a man who believed every word held weight. She led that logistics build-up in Stuttgart last year, really took initiative, and before that, oversaw a security rotation in Seoul, kept her team tight, minimal incident. I leaned against the doorway, unseen. Not that it mattered. None of those missions had required pulling a bleeding corporal over a ridgeline under sniper fire. None of them ended with 3 letters of condolence, handwritten by me, sent overseas. But they were the ones mentioned, the ones framed. I could have walked in, spoken up, corrected them, but what would that have done? Instead, I walked past the entryway and into the small sunroom off the kitchen, sat down in the chair that still wobbled on the left side. I watched the wind tug at the flag outside. It flapped with that familiar tension, half freedom, half burden. They didn't need to see me to be reminded I existed, and I didn't need to argue anymore to know I'd done the work. I whispered Hemingway's words under my breath. Courage is grace under pressure. As the clock neared 8, I stood, walked back up to the room, folded the uniform once more, not to hide it, but to carry it. And before I zipped the bag shut, I caught my reflection in the mirror. You didn't lose rank, I said to myself. They lost the right to see it. The hall was already humming when I arrived. Boots echoed off the marble floor. Medals clinked softly as high-ranking guests shook hands, exchanged familiar glances, and took their places with practiced ease. I entered alone, a printed badge folded in my coat pocket, and a quiet reminder in my mind. Don't expect anything. A young usher, no older than 20, looked up from her clipboard as I approached. She scanned my badge, then squinted. See? Wash? You're with staff, right? I said nothing at first, just let the silence make her fidget. No, I replied evenly, but thank you. Her face flushed red as she gestured toward the rear row, next to the catering entrance. No brass plaques, No designation of family, just a scatter of chairs half obscured by a serving cart. I took my place, the name card resting at the seat beside me, Lieutenant Danvers. Not even close. Behind me, the aroma of reheated meatballs lingered in the air. Around me, the others settled into their assigned places up front, where the camera lights were brighter and names were said aloud. Rayburn spotted me from across the aisle, walking stiffly in my direction, with that parade ground posture he never dropped. His eyes flicked to the misplaced card, then to me. "It's just a name," he said with a shrug. "Don't make it bigger than it is." I met his gaze without blinking. "You're right. It's not big. It's consistent." He didn't reply. He turned and walked away, his shoulder brushing past a lieutenant who stepped aside to let him through. That's how it always was. Small slights wrapped in military protocol, delivered like fact, never insult. As the room filled further, I stepped out for air. The cold didn't bite as much as I'd hoped. Behind the building, the wind carried pieces of a ceremony that hadn't started, but had already left its mark on me. I heard footsteps behind me, light and fast. I turned to find Leora's daughter, my niece, bouncing on her heels. "Hi," she beamed. "Mom said you didn't finish military school. Did you get kicked out like Jordan's brother?" My stomach didn't twist. It folded. I bent down, eye level with her. "No, sweetheart, I just went somewhere they don't take pictures." She nodded like she understood, then ran off to chase a butterfly near the security barricade. I stood there for a long time after, not because I was hurting, but because it took time to translate that kind of pain into stillness. Back inside, I found my seat still empty. The room buzzed now, officers laughing too loud, polished boots shifting restlessly. One woman nearby, in a charcoal blazer, turned to me. "I'm Monica," she said, extending a hand. "I work with the civilian administration team. I heard Erica say you're at Veterans Affairs now. That's commendable." I shook her hand, firm and brief. "Helping people find what they've lost," I said, "is what I've always done." She smiled politely, then turned her attention toward the stage. As we waited for the formal start, Meredith appeared, like a shadow you thought you'd escaped, but always finds you at your most still. She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let Erica have her moment. Please don't interrupt anything." I didn't flinch. I wouldn't dream of speaking over someone so well amplified. She stared at me, calculating. I gave nothing away. She walked off, and I could almost hear the click of control in her heels. A man in full uniform took the stage, voice booming through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us to celebrate Lieutenant Colonel Ashby's promotion." I didn't move, didn't breathe deep. I simply gripped the edge of my seat, not from nerves, but to stop myself from standing too soon. Dinner the night before the ceremony felt like a performance for an audience that had already left. The table was dressed like it belonged in a magazine spread, too polished, too color-coordinated. No one was eating. Meredith raised her glass, and with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, toasted Erica as the embodiment of everything our family stands for. I stared at the fork beside my plate, its tines perfectly aligned, untouched. No one acknowledged I was there, not directly, but the air shifted every time I moved, like they were waiting for me to disrupt their carefully arranged silence. I excused myself without a word, stood, and made my way down the hallway. Just before I rounded the corner, I caught Rayburn's glance. It wasn't concern, it wasn't curiosity, it was a warning. The same look he gave recruits right before a verbal dressing down. I didn't break stride. Upstairs, I replayed the phone call that started this mess. Meredith's voice had been flat, as if reading from a script. "Just don't wear anything distracting. Let this be Erica's moment." She said it like she was doing me a kindness. I'd been standing in a crowded airport terminal in Germany when she called. Just come off a 14-hour flight from the field. No one met me at the gate. No one asked if I'd made it back. "I'm not here to be seen," I'd said then, "just to witness." Back then, I believed it. Now? I heard the rot in those words. Morning came fast. I was up before the sun, moving through the kitchen quietly, when I heard the rustle of papers. Erica sat at the island, dress uniform hanging on the pantry door, flipping through her speech notes. Her face looked as it always did before she stepped into the spotlight, polished, prepared, and wholly certain. She didn't look up when she spoke. "You're not planning to do anything weird today, right?" I opened the fridge, took out the water pitcher. "I'm planning to be quiet," I said, tone even. "That's what you've trained me to be." She looked up, blinked once, then laughed. Too high, too fast. But she didn't argue. I placed my glass down. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a printed sheet. Folded, but clean. I slid it across the counter. She hesitated, then opened it. It was the redacted military email. The one sent anonymously years ago, questioning my leadership during a mission that had saved lives. The one that nearly ended my clearance. Her face paled as she scanned the text. She knew it. I could see it. "You used my silence like a weapon," I said. "I'm just showing you I was listening the whole time." She looked up, jaw tense. "You shouldn't be here." I stepped back, smile restrained. "I should have never left. That was your mistake." The words hung between us like a drawn blade. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and left the kitchen, footsteps controlled, unhurried. In the hallway, Meredith appeared like a ghost, too rehearsed to surprise me. Her voice was softer this time, almost pleading. "You're not going to start something, right?" I looked at her with a calm I didn't feel. "No," I said. "I'm going to finish something." She blinked. I didn't stay long enough to see what else she had to say. Back in my room, I reached for the uniform bag. For once, I didn't hesitate. I didn't hide it. I carried it openly as I stepped out the front door, my heels clicking sharp against the steps. At the entrance to the ceremony lobby, I paused. I still wasn't wearing it, but now I was carrying it where everyone could see. The back row always has a particular chill to it, not from the AC, but from irrelevance. I sat where I was told, behind rows of polished brass and stiff shoulders, surrounded by people whose glances slid right past me like I was a support beam holding up a room they preferred not to decorate. Across the wide hall, Erica floated. That's the only word for it. She moved like someone who had timed every blink, rehearsed every smile. The MC leaned in to say something, and she tilted her head just so, like a scene rehearsed in front of the bathroom mirror. I watched. That's what I do best, apparently. The prelude began. Bright visuals, upbeat music. A montage of family service moments played on the large screen above the stage. Flag ceremonies, commendations, childhood snapshots in camo onesies. And then, there it was. Or rather, there it wasn't. I recognized the opening frame, candle strike. The operation had a visual signature even in its redacted form. A brief clip flashed. A desert, a chopper, 3 silhouettes moving low against a burning sky. That was mine. But before the segment could fully unfurl, the screen cut sharply to Erica's boot camp graduation. Clean, cheerful, parent-approved. Not a glitch. A redirect. I didn't blink. My hand, however, tightened just slightly on the edge of the program booklet. No one around me stirred. No raised brows. No whispered confusion. The edit had worked exactly as intended. Quiet, invisible, thorough. I felt a glance before I saw it. Meredith turned around slowly in her seat, 3 rows ahead, eyes sweeping the crowd behind her, landing briefly, deliberately, on me. We locked eyes. She blinked once, then faced forward again. It wasn't a tech error. It was a decision. There's a quote I read once, Elie Wiesel, I think. "Silence isn't neutral, it's consent." I straightened my spine and folded the booklet in half, neatly, like I was dismissing a file no longer needed. When Erica took the stage, applause fluttered politely. She adjusted the microphone and began with all the poise of a publicist's dream. She talked about loyalty, about perseverance, about what it means to lead from the shadows when recognition isn't guaranteed. The phrasing was familiar. Too familiar. True leadership, she said, is about absorbing consequences without demanding applause. My breath paused mid-inhale. That was mine. My line. From a leadership memo I drafted during an off-record training in Cyprus. It had never been published, never circulated widely. But I'd shared it once, quietly, with Erica. Back when I still thought being sisters meant sharing truth. To the crowd, she sounded wise, grounded. One officer near the front leaned to his colleague and whispered, "She's grown. That line hit hard." I didn't flinch, but I noted his nameplate, because if people were going to quote my life, I deserved to know who was echoing it. As the speech continued, I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet, my original memo. I opened it on my lap, unlocked my phone, and took a photo with a timestamp. I didn't plan to post it, I just needed the record. Then I slid the paper beside me on the seat. Not to show anyone, just in case they ever asked. The applause built again as Erica closed her remarks. She smiled like someone who knew the cameras were capturing all the right angles. The lights caught the insignia on her collar, the ones she'd earned publicly, and in part, through what wasn't hers. She stepped off the stage, nodding as hands reached out to congratulate her. I leaned forward slightly and murmured to no one in particular, "Your voice sounds clearer when it's stolen from silence." They swarmed her like she was the last clean flag on a battlefield. Inside the reception hall, the hum of pleasantries masked the undercurrent of performance. Officers, retired brass, civilian dignitaries, all orbiting Erica with easy praise and practiced admiration. She was radiant, back straight, smile sharp, eyes gliding from handshake to handshake like a politician trained in diplomacy from birth. I stood near the bar, half-shadowed behind a floral arrangement so perfectly centered, it looked more staged than the speeches. No one addressed me. I didn't expect them to. That's not how ghosts are treated. We're not ignored. We're simply not included. "Erica is the embodiment of discipline," Meredith announced as she clinked her glass. "She stayed. She earned. She never ran." There it was. Not just the applause. The precision-engineered message. I gripped the edge of my chair, feeling the fabric dig into my palm. The people laughed, clapped politely, sipped their drinks. No one asked who she might have stepped over to reach that pedestal. And then Erica took the microphone. "I used to think loyalty meant staying no matter what," she began. "But sometimes it takes walking away to realize what you left behind wasn't the problem. It was you." The air inside me stopped. I had written that line. Not in a diary, not in a blog post, but in a classified debriefing following a decision I made during a moral standoff in a remote outpost. No press, no podium. Just lives in the balance, and a signature at the bottom of the order. Meredith beamed. Rayburn nodded slowly, the way he did when someone said something he wished he'd said first. Erica smiled as if she'd peeled the words from her own backbone. I stared ahead, pulse steady. The betrayal didn't hurt, not anymore. It confirmed something I had long suspected. Erica hadn't come here to succeed. She came to inherit. And she wasn't picky about which legacy she needed to carve up to do it. Near the punch table, a young officer leaned toward her. "That op, Raptor climb? My cousin was part of the evac. You're a legend for that." My breath didn't catch. It calcified. Because Raptor climb was mine. I planned it, executed it, and carried out 2 of the wounded myself when comms went dead. Erica had read the reports. She had been stateside. She just smiled and gave him a modest shrug. She didn't correct him. Of course she didn't. I walked to the edge of the room, far from the catered lighting, opened my secure drive on my phone, located the original field briefing, my signature at the bottom, typed a short note. Not for revenge, for record. Then sent it to my encrypted archive. I closed the screen and tucked the phone in my coat pocket. I turned to a junior officer standing nearby. He nodded at me, vaguely familiar. "Nice speech, huh?" I offered a smile. Truth has its own legs. It always finds the room eventually. He tilted his head, uncertain whether that was a compliment or a warning. As the music shifted to background strings, Meredith approached. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her voice was low, tight. "She's everything I hoped you would be, but you broke formation." I leaned closer, calm in a way she didn't expect. "I didn't break formation," I said. "I broke the silence." She blinked, lips parted slightly. Then she walked away. I watched as Erica posed beside the commander for a final photo. Shoulders squared, a handshake caught mid-frame. I slipped a flash drive onto the event photographer's table, right beside the shot list. It held no virus, no scandal, just dates, times, and authorship. Truth, archived. Then I walked out, quietly. The seats were arranged like a chessboard, each name a designation, each row a hierarchy. But my name wasn't there. Again. This time, there wasn't even a mistake to hide behind. No misspelled card, no swapped place tag. Just absence. I stood near the catering station for too long before a junior aide approached, clipboard in hand and confusion on her face. "You're with the vendor line, ma'am?" she asked hesitantly. I smiled, slow and precise. "No, you'll know who I am soon enough." She blinked, nodded as if she understood something she didn't, and walked away. The front rows were already filling with the predictable cast. Family in their best conservative suits, generals whose resumes were longer than their patience, local dignitaries hunting for photo ops. I took a seat where no one could see me clearly, but everyone could see me enough to wonder why I was there. Erica took the stage like she had rehearsed every movement, and maybe she had. She opened with gratitude, slid effortlessly into symbolism. "Some sacrifices," she said, "come from those who couldn't stay the course. We honor them too." I watched her mouth the words, then glanced down at the military pin on my lapel. First time I'd worn it outside of a classified facility. Funny how something so small could weigh more than a sidearm. "They thought I came unarmed," I whispered under my breath. "But I came wearing history." Erica's voice rose with rehearsed intensity. "Loyalty, integrity, perseverance." Each word hit like a stone skipped across water, smooth on the surface, hollow underneath. Meredith sat in the front row, beaming, her applause always just a beat ahead of the crowd's. Then the room shifted. The door near the west entry opened without a sound, but the energy changed instantly. Not from sound, but from recognition. General Alvey walked in. No introduction, no fanfare, just presence. His eyes swept the room. They paused on no one, until they landed on me. And then he walked, straight, deliberate, unwavering, across the floor, ignoring every hand that reached out to greet him. He stopped directly in front of me, raised his hand. "General Walsh, ma'am," he said loud enough for the whole room to hear. "An honor to see you again." The air stilled. Erica's voice faltered mid-sentence. Her next word caught in her throat, never made it out. Meredith's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. I stood, not to grandstand, not to perform, but because no one salutes a sitting general without a return. I returned his salute with the same form I was once taught to execute under enemy fire. And then the whispers began. Did he say, "General? Walsh?" I thought she wasn't military anymore. A few officers stood. A major 2 rows ahead dipped his head in acknowledgement, eyes wide with sudden memory. Cameras turned, lights adjusted. For the first time in years, I was seen, and not by accident. Erica dropped her note card. It fluttered down like a leaf, forgotten. She bent to pick it up, but her hand trembled. Rayburn stood halfway, then sat back down slowly, as if trying to blend into the furniture. Meredith didn't move. She stared at me like she had finally remembered who I used to be, and couldn't quite reconcile that with the woman in front of her. I didn't stay for applause. I didn't need it. I walked out the side door, slow and unbothered. As I passed the last row, a young lieutenant leaned toward his companion and whispered, "Was that the ghost commander from Dagger?" I didn't turn, just smiled to myself. You don't need to yell the truth when it salutes first. Outside, the sun had risen higher than I'd expected. The sky was clear, wide open, unapologetic. And as the ceremonial flag descended behind me, I stepped into the light, my shadow now longer than ever before. The sun didn't feel like victory when it touched my shoulders. It just felt honest, real, like it had no agenda. I stood in the courtyard behind the hall, coffee cup in hand, half full and long gone cold. The crowd inside thinned out slowly, like no one wanted to be the first to leave a room where a truth had just exploded. Meredith and Rayburn whispered in tight circles near the brick pillars, avoiding my eyes. Erica, surrounded but alone in all the ways that mattered now. I didn't walk over, didn't wave. I let the silence stretch. A vibration pulsed in my coat pocket. I pulled out my phone. One new message. Anonymous. The subject line was familiar in the worst possible way. I opened it. It was a forwarded version of the same redacted report that had once threatened to strip me of my clearance. The smear campaign in grayscale. Except this time, someone had traced the metadata. The digital signature? Leora's. From a base login in Kuwait. 3 years ago. You don't always see the knife in your back, I thought, but you remember the hand that held it. I didn't react. Just saved the file and let it sit in my archive, next to the others, all neatly organized by betrayal. Later, I found Meredith near the catering table. Alone for once. I approached and showed her the file without saying a word. She flinched, lips tightening. "You could have forged this," she said after a moment. "You've always had your own style." I didn't smile. "I've had my own silence too, and I'm done letting it be misquoted." She said nothing, just left the coffee she brought for me on the table and walked away. I didn't drink it. On my way back to the guest quarters, I passed the maintenance bins near the back parking lot. Something caught my eye, a crumpled bouquet in the trash, wilted roses and eucalyptus still clinging to a ribbon. I stepped closer. There, still attached, was the card I had written days earlier. "Proud of you, even if you can't admit what that costs," I had scribbled. My name had been scratched out, like it was offensive to be acknowledged. I didn't feel anger, not this time. I took a photo of the card, then slipped it into my bag. Not for revenge, just for memory. I climbed the steps to my quarters slowly, watching the way the trees moved in the wind. Soft, indifferent. At the landing, I passed Leora. She stood alone now. No admirers, no camera lights. Just her, spine rigid, eyes tired. She didn't say anything, just looked at me with something between guilt and pride. That confused middle ground, where people don't know whether to apologize or defend themselves. I nodded once, nothing more. Walked past her without stopping. We weren't at war anymore, I thought, but we'd never be at peace either. Back in my room, I set down my bag, took off my shoes, and opened my laptop. This time, I typed the report under my real name. The quiet the morning after wasn't heavy. It wasn't celebratory either. It was clean. Like rain had passed through and swept everything unnecessary away. I was already up before the first traffic buzzed outside Fort Liberty's gates. The coffee machine sputtered beside the sink as I checked my messages. None urgent. My uniform still hung on the chair, still unrumpled, still powerful even off my back. I opened my bag to repack, and that's when I saw the envelope. Cream-colored, sealed, no stamp. The handwriting stopped me. General Alvey's predecessor, Colonel Matthew Wren. Dead now, 2 weeks gone, cardiac failure in a Virginia hospital. A man who once told me that paperwork only told half the truth, and mine had too many redactions to be understood by the average reader. I opened it slowly. "Walsh," it read. No salutation, no preamble, just truth. "You were always the unclaimed asset. The one too sharp for press releases? The candle strike decision. They'll debrief it in simulations for a decade and still get it wrong. I saw what you did. Not just the extraction, but the silence after. The way you wore it. You were more than visible. You were vital. The truth has a way of filing itself. Let them call you ghost. Ghosts can walk through walls. It wasn't a eulogy. It wasn't gratitude. It was a record. And that meant more. I folded the letter and tucked it back into my folder. No need to scan it. I believed him, and that was enough. Around 9 a.m., I walked the loop behind the training field. No direction, just habit. Halfway through, a voice called out, soft but steady. "Ma'am?" A young man, maybe late 20s, stood a few yards away. Prosthetic from the knee down, barely visible under pressed fatigues. I recognized the posture, Marine. He walked toward me, each step deliberate. "Were you the one at Dagger Ridge?" he asked. "The one who made the call to hold fire until we could move?" I nodded once. "Yes." His lips parted slightly. "They never said who did it. I only knew someone stalled the command long enough for us to make it out." He stood straighter, lifted his hand, and saluted. "I got home," he said. His voice caught. "I just wanted to say thank you, while I still can." I didn't salute back. I stepped forward and took his hand. "You don't owe me that," I said, "but I'm glad you're here." We stood for a beat, then two. Then he turned and walked off, his gait steady despite the weight he carried on one side. As I headed back toward the main hall, a lieutenant I didn't know flagged me down near the stairwell. "Excuse me, General?" he said, hesitant. "Sorry, ma'am. I read something about NATO doctrine restructuring, and someone mentioned a field memo from 2016 that basically built the framework. I don't suppose you were involved in that?" I smiled. "I might have been." He blinked. "Do you still have a copy?" "I have something better," I said. "Clarity." He laughed nervously, nodded, and stepped aside as I passed. Back in my quarters, I removed the letter again, ran my hand over the envelope one last time. Then I set it down gently atop a manila folder I'd labeled years ago, but never dared open in public. The label read, "Retired, but not silent." The invitation wasn't elaborate, no signature, no polite phrasing about cordially requesting your presence. I sent it the way I lived, brief, clear, and honest. No apologies needed, just presence. 7 p.m. Dining room. I wasn't sure who would show up, but I set 4 plates anyway. The table was small, 4 chairs. No centerpieces, no folded napkins. Just the weight of things unsaid filling the space where decoration might have gone. I warmed up food I'd prepped earlier that afternoon. Simple, no ceremony. I poured water into glasses, not wine. They didn't deserve to toast anything. And then I placed it in the center of the table. A small brown box, slightly dented at one corner, sealed but faded. Red ink across the top read, "Return to sender, not recognized." It was the same care package I mailed to Leora 2 years ago. Inside, a compass, a copy of my commendation from Candlestrike, and a handwritten note. "In case you ever get lost." She never opened it. I never asked why. Now it sat between the plates, unopened. At 6:59, there was a knock. Meredith arrived first, with a foil-covered dish that still had condensation on the lid, which told me it hadn't seen an oven. Rayburn followed behind her, stiffer than usual, hands in his pockets, like he wasn't sure what to do with them in a non-ceremonial room. Leora came last. She didn't look up when she entered. They sat. No hugs, no forced greetings, just gravity. I served them without flourish. Let silence be the only music. We ate slowly. Forks clinked against plates, like Morse code no one knew how to translate. No one asked about the flag. No one asked about the general's salute. That silence was their offering, and their avoidance. Halfway through the meal, I set my fork down. "I'm not here to ask for acknowledgement," I said. "I only want to correct the story, For myself. They didn't interrupt. I didn't walk away, I continued. I was pulled into something bigger. I didn't fail out. I was recruited into what none of you were cleared to know about. Meredith glanced at Rayburn, who didn't meet her eyes. I didn't stay away because I was ashamed, I said. I stayed away because being here meant erasing what I'd done out there, and I won't do that anymore. Rayburn cleared his throat. Why didn't you ever tell us? I smiled without softness. Because you never asked, and if you had, you wouldn't have believed it. Meredith looked down at her plate. She hadn't touched the food. Leora finally looked at me. Her eyes were red, but she didn't speak. Just a single tear trailing down, like she didn't know whether to let it fall or swallow it back. That was enough. I didn't need confessions. I didn't need applause. I didn't need them to say, you were right. I just needed this. A table, a truth, and my own name intact. When dinner ended, they stood awkwardly. Rayburn offered to help clear the plates. I shook my head. I've got it. They left one by one. Meredith first, Leora last. Before I began stacking dishes, I picked up the unopened parcel from the center of the table. I walked to the bookshelf in the living room, found a spot near the bottom, and placed it there. Not out of spite, but out of memory. Some things are better left returned. 3 weeks later, I walked into a room with my name printed on every placard, every press release, every agenda slide. No abbreviation, no hiding behind acronyms or ranks that belonged to others. It read, General Colleen Walsh, Strategic Command, RET. The NATO Regional Strategy Summit wasn't designed for sentiment, but I didn't need sentiment. I needed accuracy. I took my seat at the center table, adjusted the mic, and waited for the session to begin. Around me were officials I had briefed under aliases, diplomats I'd advised through intermediaries, and commanders who had once said, I thought she was a myth. Let them see the myth in the flesh. My keynote ran 20 minutes, tight and sharp. I spoke about asymmetric pressure zones in Eastern Europe and the erosion of civilian networks under cyber-reliant regimes. The language was clean, direct, impersonal. Then I paused. I've spoken to you today in terms of theory, but now I'd like to talk about choice, I said. I want to show you what leadership looks like when no camera is present and no guarantee of applause exists. I tapped the screen behind me. A declassified order appeared. Operation Dagger, coordinates, satellite footage, signed directives. I made a call, I continued, to delay a strike that would have eliminated high-value targets because intel showed civilians in proximity, 7 children. The delay almost cost us the mission, but they lived. I let the silence settle. I don't share this for sympathy. I share it because truth doesn't need forgiveness. It needs daylight. The room didn't clap. It didn't need to. Some leaned forward, some scribbled notes, but no one moved. In the second row, I saw Erica. Her badge read, Observer in Training. No rank, no title, just a name. My assistant moved through the room, distributing folders, one to each seat. Inside, a full declassified breakdown of Operation Candlestrike. Page 3. Commanded by General C. Walsh. Time-stamped, signed. Erica opened her copy. I saw her eyes scan the page. I watched her face freeze. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. The file said what her mouth never would. At the break, she found me by the water station. You could have exposed me years ago, she said. I didn't need to, I replied. The truth waited. And today, it stopped waiting. She looked away, jaw clenched. I didn't think they'd believe you. That was never your right to assume. She nodded, just barely, and stepped aside to let someone pass. That was the end of it. I left before the final panel, walked the streets of D.C. like I had when I was 23, except this time, I didn't feel like I was trespassing in someone else's world. Back home, a letter waited on my desk. Handwritten. From a junior officer I'd mentored once, briefly. I want to do it right, it said. Not just the tactics, the cost, the silence. I want to understand that too. I pulled out a blank card and wrote back. I don't teach war, I wrote. I teach the cost of silence. Then I opened the glass case I'd ordered the week prior and gently placed my uniform inside. Not folded, not hidden, but displayed. I didn't need to wear it anymore. It spoke loud enough on its own. They erased me from the picture. I became the frame. Hi, I'm Brenna. And I was just trying to pay for my mom's medical treatment when my dad gave my credit card to my sister for a 3-day spa vacation. They told me she needed rest. They told me I was overreacting. Then she sent me a message. Fix the card. I need to book another tour. So I froze the card. And when they blamed me, I sold the house. What do you do when the people who raised you rewrite loyalty as silence and expect you to keep paying for it? The message came at 8:07 p.m., right as I was rinsing out my coffee cup. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles deep into the drywall, and I remember the way the hum of the fridge seemed louder than usual. I glanced at my phone expecting a work ping. It was from my dad, Clive. A video. In it, Mom was coughing gently, leaning on the counter, her figure backlit by our dim kitchen lamp. Her sweater sleeves were rolled halfway up her arms, and there was a kettle steaming in the background. She looked tired. He'd written, Doctor says we should act fast. We need help with the bills. She doesn't want to worry you. No panic, no urgency, just a tone that felt rehearsed, like he'd said it before. I didn't hesitate. That's the part that still gets to me. I didn't ask a single follow-up question. I transferred $40,000 from my card. Quietly. No drama. Because that's who I was in the family. The one who stepped in, not the one who stepped back. I've always believed emergencies whisper before they scream. But this whisper had a script. 3 nights later, I was cleaning out old flagged emails, trying to sort through the mess of life admin clutter that piles up when you don't sleep well. And there it was, an email from Dad dated 10 months ago. Same subject, same video, same cough, same light, same sweater. Only the timestamp was wrong. Last year. My hand stopped on the mouse. My stomach didn't drop. That's the thing. It was too quiet in me. That's when I knew something had shifted. Either he forgot he'd used it, or he knew exactly what he was doing and thought I wouldn't catch it. I called him the next morning, as casual as I could manage, asked how Mom was doing. He told me she was resting more now, said, she didn't want to burden you. Then, like it was nothing, he added, Zinnia's staying over to help cook. Zinnia. Even her name made me taste metal. She was always just visiting, always just between things, never with a plan, never without a need. And Dad, he always acted like she was sunshine after a storm, when she was the storm itself. But it wasn't her name that bothered me. It was what he didn't say. It was the silence that built a wall between his words. Later that night, I got a notification on my phone. Zinnia tagged me in a photo. I didn't even think before clicking. There she was. Legs crossed on a balcony in Maui, tropical drink in one hand, her face glowing with that curated peace only influencers and people with no rent ever managed to have. She was wearing the burgundy coat I gave her last Christmas, the one she called too plain. Back then, she opened the box and gave me that tight smile, like she was accepting charity. Now she was flaunting it like it was designer. The caption read, "Nothing like island peace. Warned self-care Shaksh deserved." I stared at the image longer than I should have. That coat, that tone, that backdrop. It wasn't just a trip, it was a performance. And I was funding the props. I tapped through the rest of her story. Private yoga, champagne brunch, a $400 massage. Not a single mention of our mother's condition. No mention of stress, no hint of anything urgent. Mom was supposedly sick. Dad said it was urgent. But Zinnia? She was getting her chakras aligned and posting gratitude quotes. I put the phone down, walked into my kitchen, sat at the table, pulled up my budgeting app. Alani Resort Spa. $14,700. Booked under my card. She didn't just use my name. She walked into a world I paid for and posed like it was hers. I didn't cry, Didn't rage. I opened my notes app, typed 2 words, medical lie. Then I opened that video again, pressed play, slowed it down, looked beyond my mother's figure. There, hanging behind her, was last year's calendar, November, still up in spring. How fitting. They didn't lie because they were desperate. They lied because they knew I wouldn't fight. They knew I'd keep the ship afloat, no matter how many holes they drilled beneath me. I thought I was paying to keep Mom alive. Turns out, I was funding someone's Instagram vacation. The ding from my phone at 6:17 a.m. pulled me out of that gray space between sleep and obligation. I was still lying in bed, half draped in a throw blanket, when the screen lit up with a voicemail from Zinnia. No text, no context. I sat up, pressed play. Fix the card, I need to book another tour. That was it. No, good morning. No, how's work? Not even a week, hey. Just a clipped order, like she was reminding me to restock the fridge. Like I was the concierge of her 5-star lifestyle. I didn't respond. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the ceiling like it had answers. Then I opened the voicemail again, this time recording the screen. Not because I didn't believe it happened, but because I needed evidence. That was the first moment I realized. I needed to stop trusting memory. I needed receipts. The card company's hotline was already saved in my contacts. I called, gave my verification, listened to the hold music hum in the background like it had no idea the world was falling apart. When the rep picked up, I asked if there were any recent charges. Yes, she replied. There are several pending transactions from a travel service, Island Getaways Inc. Would you like to review them? I didn't ask how much. I didn't want to know. I'd like to freeze the card, permanently. I could hear the hesitation on the other end, like she wasn't sure if I meant it. I understand, she finally said. We'll take care of it. The silence in my bedroom felt different after that. Not peaceful, not empowering, just clean. Like someone had finally wiped the slate, even if it left behind scars. At 8:03 a.m., the group chat buzzed. Family bubbles. Zinnia had posted, "Looks like the card's not working. Weird. Can someone fix it, please?" 10 minutes later, Clive chimed in. "Brenna, could you check? It was working fine earlier." No one asked why she had access to it in the first place. No one said thanks for all the months I had quietly paid the bills they pretended to juggle. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the thread. I left it on read, not because I was petty, but because I had finally realized something vital. Silence only feels rude when the person losing control isn't used to not being heard. That afternoon, I opened the chat to scroll. Curiosity or punishment? I don't know. Under my profile photo, someone had changed my name to Finance HQ. A bank emoji followed. Zinnia replied with a laughing emoji. Marjorie added, "So true, our little helper." Helper, not daughter, not sister, not partner in care, just helper. I closed the app without reacting, but inside, something sharp lodged beneath my ribcage. It didn't bleed. It didn't roar. It just sat there, heavy and unmoving. Later, I remembered something from college, senior year, advanced communication class. We had a big group project. I wrote the entire report, researched, cited, edited. But during the final presentation, another girl stood in front of the room and spoke every word like she had carved them herself. The professor smiled at her, then looked at me and said, "You're the reliable one, not the face." Back then, I had nodded, grateful somehow to be labeled dependable. Now I saw the truth. That wasn't a compliment. That was a warning. Around 9:12 p.m., another message popped in. Zinnia again. "I really need to finalize the yoga excursion. Can we please hurry up?" Still no acknowledgement. Still no pause. And no one, neither mom nor dad, stepped in to say anything. Not a single sentence to suggest they saw me as more than a debit card with a pulse. I didn't answer. I didn't vent. I opened my laptop, pulled up a fresh spreadsheet, and titled it, "What They Owe." No, it wasn't about money. Not really. It was time, emotional labor, Birthdays spent cleaning up after their messes, apologies that never came, calls I always made first. Line by line, I listed it all. When someone names you the family bank, don't be surprised when they forget you're human. The numbers on that spreadsheet didn't look like finances. They looked like years I'd loaned out without interest. And the deeper I went, the more I realized the currency wasn't just money. It was patience, self-restraint, silence. I closed the laptop around midnight, then sat for a while at the edge of my bed, watching the stillness of my room like it might whisper back some sense. By morning, the weight hadn't lifted. I moved around the kitchen slower than usual. The mug I reached for still had traces of yesterday's coffee. I rinsed it out, poured a fresh cup, and tried not to look at my phone. Just once, I wanted a quiet morning without an electronic tug at my sense of self. Instead, I opened the drawer under the counter, the one that held things no one remembered, old can openers, batteries, and my grandmother's recipe book. It was leather-bound, faded along the spine, and filled with her precise cursive. As I flipped through it, looking for nothing in particular, a small slip of paper fluttered out and landed on the floor. I picked it up. Her handwriting was unmistakable. Never let them spend your heart like spare change. The ache that line caused wasn't new. It had just been dormant. Inez, my grandmother, had never been loud, but she was the only one who had ever looked me in the eye when I wasn't useful. I stood at the stove, the note pressed between my fingers, and a memory bubbled up like an unwanted burn. I was 11, maybe 12, and Zinnia had just thrown a tantrum because her bracelet broke. She screamed loud enough to send cousins scattering. I'd tried to fix it for her. My fingers clumsy with the wire, she pushed me away. I remember sitting on the back porch steps later, hot-faced and embarrassed. Inez had sat next to me, handed me a glass of lemonade, and whispered, "When someone takes more than they give, they're not sharing, they're stealing softly." Back then, I didn't understand. I thought she meant Zinnia was spoiled. I didn't realize she meant all of them. Around 9:45 that same morning, my phone rang. It was Mom. I answered because a part of me still believed she might say something different this time. She didn't. "Zinnia's been overwhelmed lately," she began, soft and measured, like she was giving a weather report. "The trip was supposed to help. She's had so much pressure, you know." Pressure. The word almost made me laugh. "She's always been sensitive," Mom continued, "and she didn't mean anything by it. But would you consider unfreezing the card? Just for this weekend? It might help her settle." I didn't reply immediately. I let her words linger in the air like a perfume I didn't ask to wear. I looked down at the slip of paper still in my hand. Inez's writing, still bold, still true. "Never let them spend your heart like spare change." I finally spoke. "So there was no surgery?" Silence. Mom cleared her throat. "Well, not surgery in the literal sense. Emotional stress, the therapist said. The kind of stress that can be just as dangerous. Brenna, you've always been the practical one, but..." "So there was no procedure scheduled, no doctor, no hospital." She sighed. "I thought if I told you it was for Zinnia, you'd say no." I nodded slowly, not that she could see me. "You're probably right." I thanked her for the call, wished her a good day, and hung up before she could sweeten the insult further. There wasn't rage inside me, not even hurt anymore. What I felt was clean. Cold, perhaps, but steady. The kind of clarity that doesn't shake, it sharpens. I opened my laptop again, typed Oregon real estate attorneys into the search bar. Not for a lawsuit, not yet, but because every system has pressure points. And I had finally found mine. There's no panic in clarity, only decisions. Before I closed the laptop, I reached for a tack and pinned Inez's note on the board above my desk. It sat crooked between old appointment cards and a coupon I never used, but it didn't need to be centered. It just needed to stay. They weren't hiding the truth. They just renamed it until I stopped recognizing the lies. It was Monday afternoon, the kind where the sky hovers somewhere between gray and judgment. I was sitting on the porch, letting the condensation on my iced coffee trace lazy rivers down the glass, when my phone lit up with Dad's name. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. I hadn't heard from him directly in over a week. Not since the card froze and the group chat went silent on me. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice was unusually pleasant, like someone who had rehearsed being unbothered. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Just checking in." We exchanged a few lines. Weather, work, things that didn't matter. Then, like he'd been waiting for the pause, he said it. "You've always been a little jealous of Zinnia, haven't you?" I didn't flinch. I didn't ask him to repeat it. I just looked out at the maple tree across the street and let the words hang there. "She's always been freer," he continued, like he was offering analysis, not an insult. "You've always been more structured. That's why you don't understand her choices. You get caught up in rules." I took a slow breath through my nose. "Structured people pay for freedom, I guess," I said, "and sometimes for everything else, too." There was silence, then a shift in his tone. Something clipped. "Don't take it the wrong way, Brenna. We're just different." That was the point, wasn't it? I ended the call politely, said I had a work meeting, then sat there, letting my fingers tighten around the armrest until the wood creaked beneath my palm. I wasn't angry in the usual way. I was aware. Like a fog I hadn't known was there had finally lifted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my Instagram, something I rarely did anymore, and there it was. A message request from a name I didn't expect. Damon, Zinnia's ex. "Hey," it started. "Hope it's okay I'm reaching out. Saw your last post. Thought you should know. Zinnia used to brag you'd never say no, especially with money. Said you were dependable like a vending machine." Attached was a screenshot from an old group chat. There she was, clear as daylight. "She won't even ask questions. That's her thing. You push B3 and she hands over the weekend." My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. I felt nothing. And then everything. I didn't reply. I didn't type a single word. I just downloaded the screenshot and saved it to a new folder on my desktop. I named it. They said it themselves. I sat in that stillness, letting the echoes roll in. All those times I'd caught her sneaking into my closet, into my bank account, into conversations with people I'd introduced her to, and I let it slide. I told myself she was lost, overwhelmed, misunderstood. No, she was practiced. A memory surfaced like a splinter. Zinnia at 13, stealing $20 from Mom's purse. I told her to stop. She dared me to say something. I did. Mom called me spiteful and said, "She's under stress. Why would you make it worse?" That script never changed. I just stopped reading the lines. I reached for a pen and my old leather-bound journal, the one I hadn't touched since Inez died. I started writing, not paragraphs, not reflections, just facts, dates, quotes, screenshots, receipts. Who said what? When? How many times I covered rent? Who I bailed out? What I gave up? I wasn't building a case out of bitterness. I was building it out of order. If no one else was going to remember the truth, I'd document it. One fact at a time. By Tuesday evening, I was staring at numbers that should have made me shake. They didn't. They just confirmed what my gut had already decided days ago. The itemized bill from the Alani Royal Haven Resort had finally populated on my credit card app. $14,700 for a suite. $3,800 for spa treatments. $2,000 for champagne and catering. And right there, under one of the charges, Zinnia Wilson, guest of Brenna Wilson. She didn't steal. She signed her name, clean, elegant cursive, like it belonged beside mine. Like this was something we agreed on. Like I had nodded and said, "Sure, go relax on a beach I'll never see." I clicked the resort's contact page and dialed. A woman answered with too much cheer. "Alani Royal Haven, thank you for calling. How can I help you?" I kept my tone flat. "I'm calling to confirm a recent stay on a card I own. Can you pull the guest details?" After some back and forth, she read out the name, The room type. The package. Oceanfront Presidential Suite. Includes private chef dinner, couples spa experience, and rooftop yoga. And the guest said she was, I asked, already knowing the answer. Ms. Zinnia Wilson. She said the trip was a gift from her sister. Of course she did. Please note this transaction as unauthorized, and forward all receipts, correspondence, and, if possible, video footage of check-in, directly to my attorney, I said. There was a pause, then a polite, certainly. I hung up. That was the moment the line between forgiveness and boundary became a wall. Later that evening, around 7, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I saw Mom through the side window, holding a Tupperware of banana bread like it was a peace treaty. I opened the door. She smiled like nothing had shattered. I thought you might like a little treat, she said, stepping inside before I could decide. Fresh from the oven, Zinnia helped with the cinnamon. I let her in. I let her talk. I offered tea. We sat at the table, the banana bread untouched between us. She shifted her purse from shoulder to floor, then onto the table. That's when a slip of paper slid out from the side pocket. I saw the receipt the moment it hit the wood, white with red ink. The restaurant's logo I knew well, high-end, candlelit, full of happy anniversary tables and first dates. Won $200 for dinner. Dated last Saturday. On the back, in Zinnia's handwriting. Thanks, Jess. I picked it up without a word. Mom chuckled lightly, awkwardly. Oh, Zinnia wanted to make it look like it came from you. She thought it would be cute. You're always so generous. That's not generosity, Mom, I said, not raising my voice. That's identity theft with a smile. She blinked, then gave the kind of half-laugh people give when they know they've said something ugly, but hope you'll let it slide. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why she thought that was acceptable. I folded the receipt in half, slipped it under my planner, and waited for her to leave. After she did, I photocopied it, tucked it into a folder I had labeled earlier that day. Patterns of proof. That night, I sat at my desk with only one light on. I logged into my online banking, navigated to the automatic payments section, and canceled every monthly transfer going to the house in Eugene. Water, electricity, internet. No warning, just a full stop. Then I opened Dropbox, removed my family's shared access to all our old tax documents, health records, and joint accounts. I didn't delete them. I just took back the keys. Last thing I did was tap open the Family Bubbles group chat. I didn't send a message. I just hit leave conversation. Then I opened Instagram, created a story, selected close friends, just one name on that list. Zinnia. I posted a quote that said, "Givers have to set limits because takers rarely do." No caption, no emoji, just silence. Some things don't require revenge, just receipts and a resignation from the role they cast you in. I didn't go to bed angry that night. I went to bed done. There's a difference. Anger hopes. Being done doesn't. Morning arrived like a slow, weightless thud. I made coffee out of habit, not taste. The cup warmed my hands, but nothing reached my chest. I opened my email, scrolling past ads and junk. Then I saw it. Subject: Credit Safe Alert. New inquiry under your name. I clicked. A $28,000 loan. Approved 3 months ago. Listed under my full legal name and current address. Lender: a niche personal finance company I'd never heard of. The borrower: Zinnia, my sister, using my address, my credentials, my history. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd borrowed my existence, with the confidence of people who knew I wouldn't cause a scene. I called the lender, keeping my tone even, professional. When the rep picked up, I verified my identity, then asked her to walk me through the application. Huck, I'm seeing a digital signature, she said. It matches an older document on file, possibly from school records? I paused. What documents exactly? She continued. A scanned utility bill to verify the address. Same address as yours. The IP address used traces back to a residential account in Eugene. My parents' house. I asked her to send everything to my email. I told her the signature was fraudulent. She said someone from the fraud department would be in touch. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall. There was no screaming, no pacing, just quiet. The kind that solidifies into resolve. I opened my phone and forwarded the documents to Alaric, my attorney. Subject line: New entry, Zinnia loan fraud. His response came under 15 minutes. This qualifies as identity theft. We can press charges or use this as leverage in civil negotiations. Your call. I replied with 2 words: prepare both. By evening, I moved from reaction to redirection. It was time. I logged into the utility accounts for the Eugene house, bills I'd been silently covering for years. I had told myself it was to help Mom, but helping had become hiding, enabling even. I clicked into each one: electric, gas, internet, water, and canceled the autopay. I removed my card, deleted my billing info. No one would notice, until they noticed. Then I opened the Dropbox folder where I kept all the family's shared tax documents, health insurance files, and scanned IDs. I changed the permissions, revoked their access. Nothing malicious, just separation. The digital kind that marks a shift deeper than a locked door. That night, I sat at my dining table, surrounded by silence and papers. I opened my journal again, the one I'd started filling with facts. But this time, I reached for folders. One by one, I labeled them: identity, financial abuse, verbal manipulation, legal prep. Then I printed everything: credit report screenshots, receipts, emails, texts, every proof of theft dressed up as family loyalty. I didn't do it for court, I did it for me. Because sometimes survival isn't loud, it's organized. I paused halfway through, looked down at the page I was about to hole punch, the fraud form, and I wrote a note in the corner: you can't burn down the bridge and ask me to carry you across the river. Then I sat back. I didn't check messages. I didn't scroll. I didn't wait for anyone to notice my absence. They would. I didn't tell them the bridge was gone. I let them try to cross it first, and feel the fall. Thursday morning arrived like nothing had happened. Sunlight over my kitchen sink, the hum of the fridge, the usual weightlessness of a day that didn't demand too much. Until it did. My phone buzzed at exactly 8:09 a.m. Voicemail: Zinnia. Hey, I heard the water got shut off. Did you forget the payment? Anyway, no biggie, let's talk soon. No tension in her voice. No shame. Just that soft lilt she used when she was about to ask for more. It was cheerful entitlement, wrapped in that breezy tone she wore like perfume. There's something chilling about a thief who still expects hospitality. I played the message twice, once to confirm the words, and once to confirm my response: silence. Later that day, a text arrived from Mom. Zinnia wants to apologize. She's really emotional right now. I didn't respond. 30 minutes later, Zinnia called. Her voice was delicate, scripted. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said slowly, like reciting from a cue card. Maybe I messed up, but you've always been the strong one. I admire that. Admire? That word didn't land. It bounced off something inside me that no longer needed her recognition. While she was mid-sentence, another notification slid down the top of my screen. Unknown number, no name. They're rehearsing. I heard Zinnia and your mom go over lines. Say sorry, she'll melt. Just a heads up. I stared at the message, then back at the call still in progress. Zinnia was saying something about healing the bond. I said one sentence. You're not apologizing, you're performing. Then I ended the call. No yelling, no tears. Just the kind of click that carries weight when there's nothing left to clarify. An hour passed. I made myself tea, answered 2 work emails, tried to distract myself with a spreadsheet until another email popped up. From Alaric. Subject line: new filing, address fraud confirmed. He attached the documentation. Car loan application. Cosigner, my name. Listed address, mine. Dealership, Sunset Auto Leasing. Application date, 1 week before the Hawaii trip. Same IP address as the fraudulent loan. This time, I didn't hesitate. I replied, "Send cease and desist. Official notarization. Add it to the file." It wasn't just identity theft anymore. It was boundary obliteration. They counted on my silence for so long, they assumed it was consent. I spent the afternoon in motion. No announcements, no social media quotes. I didn't even lock the door when I left. I just needed air and action. By 3 p.m., I was sitting across from the lawyer who'd helped us close on the Eugene house years ago. His office smelled of old coffee and printer paper, and nothing had changed on the walls since the last time I was there. I laid down 2 folders, one labeled, "Liabilities Created," the other, "Assets Owned." He raised an eyebrow, opened the first one. "Do I want to ask what's in here?" "Proof, and pressure points." He nodded, more curious than alarmed. "And the goal?" "I don't want to ruin anyone," I said, voice level. "But I want my name back. I want it out of their mouths, off their papers, and off their wish list." He leaned back in his chair. "Then we start with leverage, quiet, documented, effective." I shook his hand, feeling more steady than I had in weeks. Alaric called as I walked out. "They'll push back," he said. "They'll call it betrayal." "They already did," I replied. "Now I'm just writing it down." By the time I got back home, the sky had shifted, blue edged with orange, that soft hush of dusk. I pulled out my journal again, added a new entry. "I don't want to ruin anyone, but I do want my name to stop being a currency in this family." Alaric had said, "Then let's close the bank." And so I did. I gave them 4 days, not to move out, but to wake up. Only one of us did. Friday morning began with a silence I didn't break. I didn't need to. Everything that needed saying had already been documented, signed, and sealed. Literally. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house at 7:45 a.m. sharp. The street was quiet, the same sleepy suburban hum that had wrapped this place in illusions for years. But I wasn't here for sentiment. I stepped out of the car, holding a manila envelope. Inside, a copy of the house deed in my name, a notarized 4-day notice to vacate, and a printed breakdown of every mortgage, tax, and repair payment I had made over the past 6 years. Not accusations, just facts. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I just placed the envelope on the porch, dead center on the welcome mat. Then I turned and walked back to my car, closed the door with care, and drove away. The truth doesn't need ceremony, just delivery. That evening, my phone rang. Clive. I let it buzz twice before answering. His voice was tight, careful. "What is this about, Brenna?" I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the fading light. "It's not about anything," I said. "It's about everything. And it's legal." "You're breaking your mother's heart," he shot back. "She broke mine years ago," I said evenly. "This isn't revenge, it's just delivery." He hung up. No goodbye. Just static and a beep. Saturday came with gray clouds, and a knock on my door I didn't expect. Zinnia stood there, eyeliner barely holding, shoulders pulled up like armor. "We can talk this through," she said, voice brittle but forced into a smile. "You're not really going to sell the house, right?" I handed her a copy of the real estate agreement, highlighted in yellow. Closing scheduled for Monday, keys required by noon. She stared at it like it was written in another language. "That's not fair," she muttered. "You didn't even give us a chance." "You had years of chances," I said. "This is me giving myself one." She didn't reply, just stood there for a moment, then walked away without looking back. Sunday morning, I returned to the Eugene house, not alone. The locksmith was already there, waiting. He nodded and got to work while I sat in my car across the street. By the time the locks had been changed, the show had begun. Zinnia was first to arrive, trying her old key and realizing quickly it didn't fit. Clive came next, yelling before he even reached the porch. "You can't do this. This is your mother's home." Marjorie didn't speak. She just stood at the curb, arms folded, staring at the house like she'd never seen it before. I stepped out of my car, walked over calmly with a second envelope in hand. "This house is mine," I said clearly. "I paid for it. You lived in it. That ends now." I handed Clive the legal paperwork. He didn't take it at first. I placed it gently on the porch step. Then I turned around, walked back to my car, and left. No threats, no apologies, just boundaries made real. In my rearview mirror, I saw Zinnia crying, Clive pacing and cursing into his phone. Marjorie didn't move. She looked frozen, not with anger, but recognition. It wasn't shock. It was the moment someone finally sees the cost of what they've been handed for free. I didn't change the locks to be cruel. I changed them because I finally realized the door was never mine to walk through, only to keep open. Monday at noon, I stood across the street from what used to be my family's house. The sun had finally burned through the morning clouds, painting the porch with an uncomfortable warmth. A young couple parked in the driveway, trunk open, boxes in their arms. A toddler bounced around their ankles, giggling as a golden retriever tried to grab a plush toy from his hand. It was a picture-perfect scene, the kind realtors dream of and families post on moving day. I should have felt something sharp. I didn't. Just a quiet release, like watching someone else finally inherit the burden you carried for too long. New lives moved in with fresh paint. My family was still tangled in the wallpaper. My phone buzzed. A message from the real estate agent. "Transfer complete. Keys received. Congrats, Brenna." I didn't type back. I just slid the phone into my coat pocket and leaned against my car, watching the couple disappear inside. The night before, I'd driven by the house just once more, lights still on, boxes half packed near the window. I hadn't intended to stop, but Clive had been outside, tossing old tools into the back of his truck. He looked up when he saw me and walked over, jaw tight, eyes sharp. "This isn't what family does," he said, voice low. "No," I replied. "Family doesn't steal your name, your credit, your dignity. What you mean is control." He started to argue, but Marjorie had come out from behind the garage, her face drawn. "She's right, Clive," she said, her voice surprisingly clear. "We used her." He didn't speak after that, just walked back to the truck, his silence finally heavier than mine. That moment didn't bring me peace, but it brought me confirmation. Sometimes acknowledgement is all you get. Sunday, before I left the house for good, I parked out front one last time. Zinnia was inside, dragging boxes without direction. Marjorie sat on the front step, eyes unfocused, like she wasn't packing up a home, but watching something sink. I didn't walk in. This wasn't revenge. This was removal. Still, I allowed myself one step inside, just to breathe the space once more. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and worn memories. I paused in the entryway. There, on the wall beside the coat closet, hung the framed family photo from Christmas 8 years ago. I remembered that day. I wore a green sweater and stood on the far right, next to the tree. Zinnia was front and center, Clive and Marjorie close behind. Inez had been in it too, before Zinnia cropped the photo to post it online. In the frame that hung now, my shoulder was missing. Even in pictures, I had always been edited out. This time, I gave them the full crop. I turned, walked back outside, and didn't look back. I left the house key beneath the ceramic frog planter by the front step, texted the new owners. "All clear, wishing you laughter." The drive home was long but quiet. Somewhere along the back roads, I pressed play on an old voicemail from Inez. She had left it during one of the family's colder winters. "Baby," she said, "you don't need to fight to be seen. You just need to walk into places that already have light." That night, I made tea and sat in my kitchen, the one I paid for, in the house I had filled myself. I thought about everything I had done, and everything I had stopped doing. I didn't regret the locks, the documents, or the silence. What I regretted was how long it took me to believe I was allowed to protect myself. The worst part of being erased isn't that they forget you, it's that they expect you to thank them for the effort. The next morning passed uneventfully, until it didn't. By 10:12 a.m., I was sipping coffee on my porch in Portland, sorting through junk mail, when my phone rang. The screen lit up. Mom! I stared at the name, thumb hovering. I hadn't heard her voice since the locks changed and the porch emptied. I should have let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. Hi, I said flatly. Marjorie's voice was barely above a whisper, soft and shaky, like she'd rehearsed sorrow in the mirror. We need to talk, she said. It's not what you think. I didn't respond. She took that as an invitation. Zinnia's been crying, she added, a tremble carefully placed for effect. She wanted to get you something from Hawaii. It was supposed to be a surprise. A surprise, paid for with my credit, in my name. With which money? I asked quietly. There was silence on the line. Then came the soft chuckle, one I'd heard all my life when they wanted to wave discomfort away. You always take things too seriously, Brenna. I closed my eyes for a breath. Not anymore. I ended the call before she could spin the guilt wheel any further. That afternoon, I walked into Alaric's office for the final paperwork. His assistant greeted me with a knowing smile. He's got it ready for you. Inside, Alaric handed me the stack of documents. The real estate transfer, the final deed, and the legal confirmation of sale. No gray areas, no family clause, no footnote for forgiveness. He pointed to one line. Sole owner, Brenna Wilson. This protects you, he said. No contest, no clawback. What you've done is clean. And final. I nodded. The air in my chest expanded in a way it hadn't for months. I left the office lighter, not because the burden was gone, but because I had finally set it down. By sunset, the ripple effects arrived. Marjorie texted, short and shaky. We didn't realize what you were really holding up. Clive's voicemail was sharp-edged. I can't believe you'd do this to your own parents. Zinnia's email came next, subject line. Urgent. A screenshot of her rejected car loan application. Her message below. Thanks a lot, sis. I archived each one, not out of spite, just as evidence. They thought love meant silence. I redefined it. Love now means limits. That evening, I brewed a pot of tea and sat on my porch with the real estate folder beside me. The house behind me was quiet. No footsteps stomping through shared rooms. No voice from a parent reminding me what I should have done. I opened a fresh journal page and wrote, I protected my peace. That's not betrayal. That's inheritance. I thought silence would feel like exile, but it felt like air. Thursday came with no drama, no storm clouds, just a phone call I didn't expect, but probably should have. I was folding towels when the screen lit up. Grandma Inez. I answered with a soft, hi. Her voice, low and steady as always, cut through like a warm knife. They're staying here for now, she said. Clive's folding napkins like a nervous trainee. Zinnia's not late, for once. I didn't say anything, just let the image sit. My father, whose hands had only known control, now fumbling with linens under fluorescent lights. My sister, who never met a clock she respected, showing up early for something. Then, Inez added, they still talk like they're the ones who were betrayed. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That sounds about right, I murmured. You know, she said after a pause, I told you a long time ago, don't confuse endurance with loyalty. Some chains were never meant to be worn. I smiled at the memory. I'd been 16, crying in her kitchen after yet another family holiday that left me invisible. She continued, I'm proud of you, not because you fought, because you finally walked away with your name still yours. I didn't cry. Not then. But something quiet shifted inside me. Later that night, I sat on my couch with a journal open on my lap, pen resting on the page. I hadn't written anything yet, just stared at the white space, letting the stillness hold me. Healing isn't loud. It's the absence of alarms. That thought settled into my chest, heavy in a different way than grief or anger. It was the weight of peace. The next afternoon, I went to the market to pick up a few things. Nothing special, just groceries for the weekend. As I stood in the checkout line, I overheard a woman behind me talking to her friend. "I paid the rent," she said, her tone tired. "She took the credit, but I let her. Because that's what you do for family, right?" I didn't turn around, didn't nod or offer a knowing glance. I just stood still, absorbing it. I used to think dignity was earned, but sometimes it's just reclaimed. When I got home, there was a postcard waiting in my mailbox. No envelope, no return address. On the front was a watercolor of sunflowers in a field. On the back, in handwriting, I recognized immediately, it read, "Thinking of you. Mom." No apology, no ownership, just the echo of presence without substance. I didn't throw it away. I didn't reply either. I slid it into the drawer with my legal papers, next to the receipts and the contracts, where it belonged. A piece of the puzzle, not a peace offering. That evening, I made tea and pulled Inez's old notebook from the shelf. I hadn't opened it since before the sale closed. I flipped through the pages, her handwriting steady and elegant, notes about herbs, stories about her childhood, and occasional quotes she'd copied down from books or sermons. One line caught my eye, underlined twice in dark blue ink. "People don't always mean to hurt you, but if they do it repeatedly, intention becomes irrelevant." I traced the words with my finger. I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I had already closed the door and locked it from my side. 6 months later, I found myself walking through an old part of the neighborhood on a quiet Saturday morning. The breeze was light, and someone nearby was mowing a lawn. I didn't plan to go by the house, but my feet did what they wanted. I slowed as I passed. There it was, my former home. But now it looked nothing like the one I remembered. The shutters had been painted a soft blue. There were sunflowers blooming in the front beds, a red tricycle tipped near the walkway, and a golden retriever wagging its tail at the fence. A little boy squealed with delight from the porch, his parents laughing behind him. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. I didn't sell the house out of revenge. I sold it so I could stop living inside someone else's story. That night, back in my apartment, I turned off all the lights except the one over my desk. The room was quiet. My kind of quiet now. No overhead fans humming, no footsteps above me. Just me, a cup of peppermint tea, and a folder I hadn't opened since the sale. I opened my laptop and created a private channel. Then I clicked Upload. The file was simple. A 3-minute video slideshow. No music, no voiceover. Just photos, screenshots, emails, bank receipts, copies of texts, snippets of contracts. At the end of the clip, a single line appeared on screen. "They took everything I gave, so I took back what was mine." I didn't post it, I didn't share it, but I saved it. Not for them, for me. For record. For the version of myself who once needed to prove she was telling the truth. On Monday, I taught a workshop at the community center. The topic? Financial boundaries, when love becomes leverage. There were 8 women in the room, all older than me, all nodding in painful recognition as I spoke. I didn't need applause. I just needed to make sure no one like me walked that road blind again. Through acquaintances, I sometimes heard what they were up to. Clive, it turned out, had started going to a local support group, not just sitting in silence, but talking. About control, about pride. Zinnia had picked up part-time shifts at a wellness shop, organic soaps, yoga mats, quiet hours. Marjorie had joined a women's group at a church, volunteered on Sundays. None of them reached out. None of them said, "I'm sorry." I received a letter one day, no return address, just my name and street handwritten in cursive I knew too well. I didn't open it. I placed it in a shoebox beside a few keepsakes I kept in the back of the closet. The deed to my home, the printout of the first bank account I opened alone, and a yellow sticky note that said, in my own handwriting, "No one can erase a name you own." That night, I sat on my porch as the sun dipped past the horizon. I pulled out my phone and recorded a short voice memo, just for me. Forgiveness isn't the door, it's the sidewalk. It doesn't take you back, it takes you past. I saved the file, then tucked the phone away and closed my eyes. This wasn't a happy ending. It was a quiet one. And that's what I always wanted. Quiet that stayed.